of this right by the people, and last but not least, the duty to contribute to the achievement of the right of this right to access to health care in other countries in the world. Fidel himself led a titanic effort throughout his life to achieve this goal, which allows Cuba to show indicators in some cases that are greater than those of developed countries. Just to mention two of them, today Cuba has more than 100,000 doctors, approximately 9 per 1,000 inhabitants, which is the highest number in the world. And we have in Cuba 13 centers for training doctors, which graduate not only Cuban professionals, but also thousands of doctors for hundreds of countries, as Ambassador Cabañas mentioned a few minutes ago. These undeniable achievements of the Cuban Revolution, which emanated from the visionary mind of Fidel, currently benefit the Cuban people and others in the world when we face the enormous challenge of a global pandemic. I would like to refer specifically to the Henry Reef Brigade, which also was the result of Fidel's visionary mind and whose creation I had the privilege to witness. As many of you know, Cuban medical internationalism was born almost together with the revolution, when a small medical brigade was sent to Chile in 1960 after a strong earthquake hit this South American nation. Since then, more than 400,000 Cuban doctors and health professionals have provided services in 164 countries. Based on this experience, the Henry Reef Brigade, highly specialized to intervene in situations of disasters and serious epidemics, was created in 2005. Due to my position at that time at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I had the enormous privilege of attending in early September 2005, the ceremony at the Havana Convention Center in which Fidel announced the constitution of this brigade. A couple of days earlier, at a TV appearance, Fidel had offered the assistance of 1,100 Cuban doctors to the city of New Orleans, hard hit by Hurricane Katrina. Later on that same week, at the event at the Convention Center, Fidel officially announced the constitution of the brigade to help those affected by Hurricane Katrina in the south of the United States, as well as to inform his decision to expand Cuba's offer to 1,586 doctors who were ready to depart immediately, not only for New Orleans, but also for other devastated places in Louisiana and in the neighboring states of Mississippi and Alabama. Today, I still have a very vivid in my mind the image of those more than 1,000 doctors sitting with their white coats and their olive green backpacks, listening to Fidel and ready to go to the aid of the American people. It was there at that event when Fidel declared that this brigade would bear the name of Henry Reef, in honor of the young American from New York who fought for 7 years with the Cuban Liberation Army during our first war of independence against Spain until he fell in combat in 1876 as a brigadier general. I remember that at that time, the governor of Louisiana, Kathleen Blanco, responded favorably to the offer of assistance from Cuba and even issued an order to allow doctors not registered in the state of Louisiana to practice medicine, given the emergency situation created by Hurricane Katrina. However, unfortunately, the W. Bush administration rejected our offer and did not even mention Cuba in the long list of countries that provided aid to the people of Louisiana and other United States state. Fidel realized in advance that this could be the reaction of the United States government. And he told the doctors gathered for the occasion at that event in Havana, and I quote, "The Henry Reef Brigade has been created, and whatever the task you take on in any corner of the world or in our country, you will always carry the glory of the courageous and dignified response that you have given to the call for solidarity with the broader people of the United States, and specifically their humblest children," end of quote. A great deal has been written in recent months about the accomplishments of the Henry Reef Brigade since the moment it was created. Since 2005, 7,000 doctors, nurses, and health specialists who are part of this brigade have provided services in more than 20 countries. Among their most outstanding interventions, I can mention the 32 field hospitals that were deployed in Pakistan after the 2005 earthquake, the medical team that went to Indonesia in 2006 after the tsunami, the 1,700 health professionals who provided services in Haiti after the 2020 earthquake and afterwards to fight cholera in Haiti too, and the 3 brigades that fought Ebola in Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. The greatness of Fidel's idea in creating this brigade has been vividly revealed in recent months through the highly commendable work of more than 3,000 of its members in confronting the COVID-19 pandemic in almost 40 countries, from Latin America, the Caribbean, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. They have joined forces with the more than 28,000 doctors already working in 59 countries before the pandemic was declared, many of whom have been trained to assist the host countries coping with the COVID-19. The selfless dedication and altruism of the Henry Reef Brigade has earned it the recognition and admiration of many in the world, despite the shameless and unsuccessful attempts by the current US administration to try to discredit the Cuban medical collaboration abroad. Assisting others and sharing Cuba's human resources with other nations in need will continue to be an inalienable principle of the Cuban Revolution. Cuba will continue defending the ideal that only solidarity among countries can create that better world that is still necessary and possible, as Fidel said. To conclude, I would like to quote another phrase from the speech delivered by Fidel on the occasion of the establishment of the Henry Reef Brigade, which demonstrates the validity of his legacy. I quote, "Not once throughout its selfless revolutionary history did our people stop offering their medical aid in the event of catastrophes in solidarity with other peoples that require it. No matter how abysmal the ideological and political differences were, or how serious were the offenses received from the governments of any country," end of quote. 15 years after that historic event, this phrase continues to guide the work of our health professionals. 15 years after the birth of the Henry Reef Brigade, we continue to be moved by the expressions of respect and appreciation for our doctors in all the countries in which they serve. Fidel continues to be alive in each of the lives that our doctors save, and in any part of the world where people say, "Thank you, Cuba." Without the thought and work of Fidel, this would not have been possible. As a Cuban, I can only say today, thank you, Fidel. And to the friends of Cuba tonight, I say, thank you for your sincere tribute and for keeping Fidel's legacy alive. Hasta la victoria siempre, Fidel. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Her Excellency Josefina Vidal. We are now very honored to have with us Her Excellency Ana Silvia Rodriguez, who is the chargé d'affaires at Cuba's permanent mission to the United Nations. I hand over the virtual microphone to you, Ana Silvia.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizing for putting in place this wonderful program. I would like to thank also Ambassador Cui from Vietnam for his readiness to participate in the seminar today. And also Ambassador Adan Chavez and the staff of the Venezuelan Embassy in Havana. We are going to see a video after, and also for his engaging in this seminar as soon as we request them to participate. I would like to start, as you know, with the trend of the revolution, a radical process of political, economic, and social transformation began in Cuba. And all this would also be clearly reflected in an entirely different revolutionary foreign policy. The foremost architect, organizer, and protagonist of this new foreign policy was Fidel himself, who in his conception ran from the root that shaped our nationality, from the legacy of the 1868 and 1895 war, from independence, and from the most advanced ideas and concepts of the entire Cuban People's Revolutionary Movement and of the international movement that preceded him. Cuba ceased to have a foreign policy reliant on and subordinated to United States in order to exercise at all levels, including the multilateral level, an independent national foreign policy no longer based on interests, but on solid principles that are constituent elements of our Constitution, which has guaranteed our conscious continuity, consistency, legitimacy, and the recognition in the international arena. Since its inception, the Cuban revolutionary diplomacy has upheld principles such as the defense of sovereignty, independence, and social justice, internationalism, the unity of the country of the global south, international cooperation and solidarity, and the struggle against imperialism, colonialism, or neocolonialism that have not only delineated Cuba's foreign policy, but have also conditioned Cuban action in all contexts, both bilateral and multilateral. Fidel taught us to adopt, in addition, not in empty rhetoric, but in staunch defense, the basic principle of international law, respect for the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of the state, the self-determination of the people, the rejection of the interference in the internal affairs of the other states, the right to international cooperation for mutual and equitable benefit and interest, the peaceful relation among states, and other precepts that make up the purpose and principle of the United Nations Charter. The LAM, the Henry Reed Brigade, the support to Vietnam in his fight against colonialism that the previous speaker spoke about it, are concrete examples of our principle of foreign policy. In his address at the United Nations General Assembly in 1960, all these principles of the Cuban foreign policies can be summarized, and I quote, "In sum, we support all the noble aspirations of all the peoples. This is our position. We support and shall always support everything that is just and stand against colonialism, against exploitation, against monopolies, against militarism, against the armed races, against war games. We shall always be against those things. That shall be our position." End of quote. In addition to this quality in his thinking, many have said that Fidel traveled to the future and returned to warn us the calamities and the challenge that would soon beset mankind. We also remember his historic speech at the Earth Summit in 1992, when many did not even know the words global warming or climate change. But Fidel was already calling us to come together in the defense of our planet through sustainable consumption and production, and not through arms race. Fidel also advocated for multilateralism as the only path to move toward a democratic, fair, and equitable international order that meets the call for peace and sustainable development of all peoples, on understanding that no country, however powerful it may be, can face on its own global challenges such as climate change, the global drug problem, or the organized transnational crime, or COVID-19. And he also taught us that only through cooperation and dialogue can we face mankind's common challenges. We recognize and actively, he recognized and actively defended the enormous importance of the unity and mobilization of the country of the South in the joint solution of their common problems, an idea that remains fully valid today, when regrettably the abysmal inequality separating developed and developing countries is increasing, and where we're still far from eradicating poverty, hunger, diseases, and illiteracy that hundreds of millions of human beings still suffer from. His leadership as a statesman and world leader was evident in his visit to the United Nations headquarters, whose imprint and oratory left indelible marks. His memorable speech in October 12, 1979 still reverberates in the General Assembly Hall, and its validity, more than 40 years after it was delivered, is unquestionable. He unmistakably marked the activity of the developing country platform for political agreement, such as the non-aligned movement, the Group of 77 and China. Memorable examples include Cuba's two-term chairmanship of the non-aligned movement, his vision and leadership, which led to the holding of the first South Summit of the Group of 77 in Cuba, his recognition as host of the Ibero-American Summit held in Havana, or at the summit held annually by the Cuban with the CARICOM countries, among many others. Peter Thompson, president of the United Nations General Assembly, at its 71st session, during the General Assembly memorial tribute to the Commander-in-Chief on the occasion of his death, said, and I quote, "Castro embodied the struggle of the Global South for independence, justice, and development. Castro's activism in pursuit of a fairer and more equitable world made him a symbol of resistance and inspiration to people across the world in Latin America, Africa, and beyond. It was precisely the activism in defense of the just cause that made Fidel the most genuine follower of our national hero, Jose Marti, the most universal of all Cubans, who said that mankind is composed of two sorts of men, those who love and create, and those who hate and destroy. The inspiration that Fidel engendered in those who, like him, love and create, regardless of the country we come from, must lead to an activism that advances the common cause of the humanity and not the interests of the elites. In 1960, at the General Assembly, Fidel said that, and I quote, "The problems of the world are not solved by the use of threat or by sowing fear. Let the philosophy of plunder disappear, and the philosophy of war will have disappeared." End of quote. At a time when humanity is facing a common enemy of historic proportions, Fidel's ideas constitute unavoidable truth which should inspire us to love and create, which should inspire us to promote multilateralism, dialogue, international cooperation, and solidarity. I thank you.
Thank you so much to Her Excellency Ana Silvia Rodriguez for that wonderful presentation, and thank you to all four ambassadors. We've had some technological challenges today, and we are finally live streaming on YouTube, which is fantastic. That means that our compañeros and compañeras in Cuba are now watching us live online. Unfortunately, many of you know that the Zoom platform is an American platform and is not accessible in Cuba. But we are very honored that we have now that connection through YouTube with our friends, especially at the offices of ICAP, the Instituto Cubano de Amistad con los Pueblos. We know that they're doing a live screening, and we also know that we have friends from the Unión de Jóvenes Comunistas, from the Union of Young Communists, watching us live on YouTube. So a big hello. We have over 500 people participating on Zoom and through YouTube, and that's a big honor for us for our celebration for Fidel. I just wanted to introduce quickly myself and my co-chair before we continue our program to those who are just joining us on YouTube. My name is Tamara Hansen, and I'm an executive member of the Canadian Network on Cuba, the coordinator of Vancouver Communities in Solidarity with Cuba, an author of 5 Decades of the Cuban Revolution, The Challenges of an Unwavering Leadership, and an editorial board member of the Fire This Time newspaper based in Vancouver, Canada. And my co-chair today is Ike Nahem, who's a longtime anti-imperialist and socialist activist. He's a retired Amtrak Locomotive Engineer, member of Teamsters Union and Railroad Workers United. He is active in Cuba solidarity work in the New York, New Jersey area, and a central organizer of the International Conference on the Normalization of US-Cuba Relations, and author of The Life of Fidel Castro, a Marxist Appreciation. So the two of us are hosting an amazing program. We've got over 20 participants and panelists today, and we're really honored to be doing this together to celebrate the life and legacy of Comandante Fidel Castro. We're now going to go into poetry and then some video greetings. Our poetry is by Nancy Morahon. This is a poem that she read in an interview with Sally O'Brien and Peggy Gilpin. And it is a poem, many of you know Nancy Morahon is a famous Afro-Cuban poet and really a phenomenal voice of the Cuban Revolution in favor of Fidel, but also the challenging situation of women in Cuba and the challenges that women and Afro-Cubans have overcome throughout the process of the revolution and throughout history. So I am very honored now to present to all of you this poem by Nancy Morahon.
Nancy Morahon is Cuba's most renowned, most widely published and translated woman poet of post-revolutionary Cuba. Last year, on her 75th birthday, the Union of Artists and Writers of Cuba paid homage to her, and Margaret Gilpin from Cuba in Focus, the monthly radio program about Cuba on WBAI in New York City, was able to interview her. We've pulled from it Nancy reading her famous poem for Fidel in both English and Spanish.
I will read the original, which was written in Spanish, because I read in Spanish and write in Spanish, but then I will read the English translation, a very personal English translation. It's important, I want to tell that it was written during his lifetime, because there are other poems of mine written after he passed away. Ronda de la Fortuna. Fidel tiene fortuna, una sola fortuna, estar entre nosotros por un mundo mejor. ¿Qué fortuna mayor? Fidel, sin odio y sin hiel, abre muros y ventanas. Fidel. Fidel tiene fortuna, una sola fortuna, la fortuna de ser Fidel. My own English translation. Lullaby of Fortune. Fidel has a fortune, a one and only fortune, which is to be among ourselves for a better world. What a wonderful fortune. Hatredless and bitterless, Fidel opens windows and walls. Fidel has a fortune, a one and only fortune, the fortune of being Fidel.
All right, I'd now like to hand it over to my co-host, Ike Nahem, who's going to introduce our next 3 video greetings. Ike?
Thank you, Tamara. Now, moving right along here, we've got 3 very special video greetings. The first is from President Dilma Rousseff from Brazil. Dilma, elected president of Brazil from 2011 and served till 2016. It was President Dilma who invited Cuban doctors to the country. She was removed from office on trumped-up charges in a parliamentary coup in 2016. And we're very happy and honored to get this message from President Dilma Rousseff from Brazil. She will be followed by a solidarity message from Ambassador Adan Chavez, who is the Venezuelan ambassador to Cuba, Vice President of International Affairs of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, and is the director of the Hugo Chavez Institute of Higher Studies. And our last message in this sequence is from a historic revolutionary fighter from Brazil, João Pedro Stedile, the central leader and historic leader of the landless peasant movement. I would just say on a personal note, I met Brother Stedile at a conference in Havana in the 1990s on other occasions, giant anti-imperialist, anti-neoliberal conferences that were organized by internationalist Cuba, even in the height of the so-called special period of economic crisis. So we're going to play these 3 videos back to back, and we'll start with President Dilma Rousseff.
Agradeço a oportunidade de participar deste encontro, uma homenagem a Fidel Castro. É uma honra para mim estar aqui. Estamos vivendo uma pandemia devastadora, com milhões de mortes e uma das mais importantes ações em defesa da vida no mundo tem sido praticada pelas brigadas médicas cubanas Reef, criadas por Fidel Castro em 2005 para ajudar os povos do mundo inteiro no combate a doenças e a epidemias. Fidel Castro, um dos maiores líderes políticos da história, faria aniversário nesse 13 de agosto. E se estivesse entre nós, certamente estaria brindando orgulhoso à bravura de seus brigadistas da saúde e da vida. Desde o início da crise atual, Cuba enviou contingentes de médicos e enfermeiros a pelo menos 25 países, entre os quais 2 nações da Europa, a Itália e Andorra. O exército de aventais brancos já vinha atuando em outros 38 países, mesmo antes da pandemia. Este trabalho traduz à perfeição o conceito que Fidel justificava para essa ação humanitária da medicina cubana. Aqui em Cuba, dizia Fidel, formamos médicos com ciência e com consciência. Faço questão de dizer que sou testemunha disso. A participação de médicos cubanos foi fundamental para que conseguíssemos implantar no meu governo, entre 2013 e 2015, um dos maiores programas de assistência básica de saúde da história do Brasil, o programa Mais Médicos, que chegou a ter mais de 11 mil funcionários de saúde de Cuba e ofereceu atendimento a 63 milhões de brasileiros, que de outra forma não teriam acesso à atenção médica nas periferias e nas grandes cidades do país e também nas áreas remotas. Infelizmente, o governo de extrema-direita que chegou ao poder no ano passado tratou os médicos cubanos à base do insulto e do constrangimento, o que os obrigou a deixar o país. A presença deles neste momento no Brasil e neste momento de pandemia certamente teria feito a diferença, porque teria atenuado, se não evitado, a tragédia que o Brasil está vivendo, com o registro de mais de 100 mil mortos, dividindo com os Estados Unidos a terrível condição de epicentro da crise sanitária mundial. A visão mercantilista da saúde, a xenofobia e a intolerância ideológica do governo brasileiro contrastam profundamente com o conceito exatamente oposto da Brigada Reef, cuja ação altruísta em dezenas de países corresponde a um princípio que é a própria definição da civilização humana: nenhuma vida é estrangeira. A relação humanitária de Cuba com o mundo é exemplar e demonstra que a solidariedade é seu valor e princípio basilar. Admirável para um país que sofre tantas pressões, como é o caso de Cuba, com pressões externas. Cuba resiste a um dos bloqueios mais brutais praticados por uma potência imperialista estrangeira contra um país e seus milhões de habitantes. Fidel, sem dúvida, fez de Cuba uma barreira inexpugnável contra as investidas dos Estados Unidos. Se o bloqueio provocou e ainda provoca penúria e desconforto ao povo cubano, nem por isso impediu que Cuba se tornasse referência mundial em educação, em saúde, em cultura, em justiça social. Cuba, ao longo de mais de 6 décadas, de implacável embate norte-americano, manteve a integridade e a soberania do país e a dignidade de seu povo. Hoje, em pleno século XXI, o bloqueio a Cuba é um chocante ato de barbárie imperialista, mantido pela conduta brutal e desumana dos Estados Unidos, com o apoio de alguns poucos países submetidos a governos vassalos. No ano passado, o Brasil votou pela primeira vez na ONU contra a suspensão do bloqueio norte-americano a Cuba. Assim, rompeu com uma tradição política, tradição da política externa brasileira, que prezava o multilateralismo, o respeito à soberania das nações. Política externa que foi adotada pelo Brasil, pelo meu governo e pelo governo do presidente Lula. Foi um assinte ao povo brasileiro e foi um vexame internacional. O embargo se revela ainda mais iníquo diante do notável e merecido reconhecimento mundial, a empatia, ao altruísmo e à humanidade dos médicos e enfermeiros cubanos que se espalham pelo mundo, arriscando suas vidas para salvar a vida de outros seres humanos. Apoio integralmente, apoio totalmente o movimento que defende que as brigadas Reef recebam o Prêmio Nobel da Paz deste ano, de 2020. Seria, sem dúvida, uma homenagem aos médicos e ao povo de um país que consegue, contra todas as dificuldades a ele imposta, ainda encontrar forças e grandeza moral para ajudar outros povos. E, numa época em que o sofrimento e a exclusão fazem aflorar mazelas, como a competição exacerbada, o abuso do poder econômico, a exclusão social e o egoísmo, O Nobel da Paz às Brigadas Henry Reeve seria um tributo àquilo que a humanidade ainda tem de melhor: a solidariedade, a humanidade e a defesa da paz. Viva a Brigada Henry Reeve! Fidel Castro vive. Muito obrigada.
Un gran abrazo a todos y todas. Mi abrazo bolivariano, revolucionario, chavista, fidelista y por tanto anti-imperialista. Felicitaciones especiales a los organizadores de esta hermosa actividad, muy significativa actividad. Estamos todos los revolucionarios, las revolucionarias del mundo, conmemorando junto al pueblo cubano los 94 años del nacimiento del comandante Fidel. Gloria eterna a nuestro comandante. Gloria eterna a Fidel. Hablar de Fidel, compañeros, compañeras, es hablar de honestidad, de dedicación, de convicción ideológica. Es el ejemplo a seguir, digo desde acá, en la lucha permanente de nuestros pueblos por la libertad y la soberanía. El comandante Fidel sigue clamando, sigue gritando, nos continúa alertando contra los intentos hegemónicos del imperialismo norteamericano y sus aliados. El comandante Fidel sigue alertando contra la proliferación de armas nucleares, sigue alertando contra los intervencionismos. Podemos decir entonces que, por tanto, el comandante Fidel continúa clamando por la autodeterminación de los pueblos, por un mundo sin guerras, sin bloqueos, es decir, un mundo de paz. Un mundo, ese mundo que, como él siempre lo decía y lo seguirá diciendo, un mundo que sin duda es posible y vamos a continuar construyendo. Con Fidel a la cabeza, así como con Bolívar, con Martí, con Sandino, con Chávez, nuestros líderes y nuestras lideresas, Manuelita Sáenz y tantas otras, con todos ellos a la cabeza, a la vanguardia, seguiremos construyendo paz y socialismo. El comandante Fidel está y estará siempre con nosotros. Fidel siempre con nosotros. Así que desde aquí nos unimos a esa conmemoración que es del pueblo cubano, pero también sabemos es de nuestra América. Es una conmemoración mundial. Los 94 años del comandante Fidel. Por tanto, sigamos diciendo desde aquí entonces, Fidel para siempre, Fidel eterno. Que viva nuestro comandante Fidel. Viviremos y venceremos. Hasta la victoria siempre.
Compañeras y compañeros, por esos días estamos celebrando el cumpleaños de nuestro querido Fidel. Para nuestra militancia, yo creo que Fidel siempre cumplió un papel, un rol, como si fuera nuestro abuelo, el sabio. Como que en la duda siempre recorríamos a algún escrito, algún discurso, alguna referencia. Y si no había escrito ni discurso, su ejemplo, que está plasmado en la experiencia revolucionaria del pueblo cubano, del cual es él, Fidel, es una síntesis, yo creo, de esa experiencia colectiva de todo el pueblo. Es prácticamente imposible separar el pensamiento, la obra, las ideas, la praxis de Fidel con lo que es la revolución cubana, de lo que es la vida, la práctica del pueblo cubano. Y entonces yo creo que para nosotros del Movimiento Sin Tierra desde Brasil siempre tomamos esos ejemplos de la praxis revolucionaria para nos ayudar a animar a seguir nuestras luchas por acá, siempre mucho difíciles, contra el latifundio, contra las injusticias sociales. Y particularmente, yo creo que el sentido principal de vuestro ejemplo es la solidaridad. Ese ejemplo de solidaridad de toda la revolución cubana desde los primeros días hasta hoy es que marca como una señal de lo que es hacer cambios estructurales en la vida de la gente, en el proceso civilizatorio. Y el otro, ese amor y esa práctica de ustedes de valorar el estudio, el conocimiento. Fidel siempre fue aquel maestro que no entraba en clase, pero todo el día daba clase, estimulando a que todos nosotros estudiáramos, leyésemos, nos involucrásemos. Y quisiera encerrar les agradeciendo a Fidel y a todo el pueblo cubano por mucho que hicieron por los sin tierra de Brasil, en particular por el programa de la ELAN. Los médicos que tenemos pobres acá en Brasil y hijos de campesinos es porque se formaron en la ELAN, en Cuba y en la Venezuela. Y luego quiero agradecer también, porque fue una iniciativa particular de Fidel, el programa Sí Yo Puedo, en esa parcería inédita, Movimiento Popular, con los pedagogos cubanos. Y gracias a eso hemos logrado alfabetizar millares de compañeros pobres brasileños, que gracias a eso logramos hacer. Bueno, muchas gracias por todo lo que las brigadas médicas hicieron. Estamos empeñados para que esos viejitos del Nobel de Noruega tengan vergüenza y en vez de buscar ahí personajes de la geopolítica internacional, que pasen el premio de este año a las brigadas médicas cubanas. Viva Fidel, viva la Revolución Cubana, viva los cambios socialistas de la humanidad. Un gran abrazo a todos y a todas.
Greetings.
Wonderful. Those were fantastic video greetings from some amazing and honorable guests, and really an honor for us to share this celebration for Comandante Fidel Castro with those voices. I would now like to invite forward three organizers who are working with the US-Cuba Normalization Conference on our Saving Lives campaign, and they're going to explain a little bit about what this campaign is. I would like to invite forward Isaac Saney, who is representing the Canadian Network on Cuba, Cheryl Labache, who is representing the National Network on Cuba, and Sean O'Donoghue, who is representing La Table de Concertation de Solidarité Québec-Cuba.
Isaac, you're muted.
My apologies. Salutations to everyone. Saludos a todos y a todos. While Fidel is no longer physically with us, he lives on in the work, power, and living example of the Cuban Revolution, which demonstrates that a better world is possible, a world built on justice, dignity, and solidarity. My name is Isaac Saney, co-chair and spokesperson of the Canadian Network on Cuba, the CNC. The CNC represents Canada-Cuba friendship and solidarity organizations across Canada. A principal objective is advocating that Canadian foreign policy regarding Cuba remains based on equality and respect for sovereignty and the right of self-determination. Together with the US National Network on Cuba and La Table de la Concertation de Québec, the CNC is an organizer and sponsor of the Saving Lives campaign. In the face of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is ravaging communities across the world, but particularly in North America, especially Black communities and other vulnerable groups, we launched the Saving Lives campaign, calling for medical collaboration and cooperation with Cuba. More than 165,000 lives have been lost in the United States. A study in the New York Times points the figure at actually much more than 200,000. So the situation is extremely serious and dire. As we noted at the time of the campaign's launch, a pandemic is by definition global. Surely in the face of this worldwide menace, now is the time for international medical cooperation and solidarity, a time for joint efforts to confront the COVID-19 pandemic. Cuba, as it has done so often, has risen to this historic task and challenged that imperialist humanity. You have heard stories from previous presenters about the many countries that are drawing on Cuba's expertise in fighting COVID-19. And these medical missions have been dispatched to more than 24 countries and is part of Cuba's long history of medical internationalism. Cuba also offers treatment regimens, some of which are not available in the United States and Canada. A key component of these protocols being used on the island and in its medical missions abroad is Cuba's interferon alpha-2b recombinant. But there are other treatment protocols, other medicines that Cuba has used to successfully contain COVID-19 within Cuba itself and in the many countries to which medical missions have been sent. The Saving Lives campaign's demands are simple. It calls on the US and Canadian governments to lift restrictions on access to Cuban medical expertise in order to more effectively combat the COVID-19 pandemic. Specifically, we call for allowing US Cuba-Canada medical, clinical, and scientific collaboration, including considering inviting Cuban medical brigades to provide direct medical assistance and or to provide advice and guidance in treating COVID-19. 2, incorporating Cuba's interferon alpha-2b recombinant in clinical trials in the US, Canada, and the World Health Organization, and the granting by the US Food and Drug Administration approval for Cuba's interferon alpha-2b recombinant. And 3, ending US economic and travel sanctions against Cuba, including its extraterritorial nature and its horrible, horrendous attempts to stop all other countries from accepting Cuban medical brigades and assistance in all ongoing measures that prevent Cuba from accessing and importing medical equipment and medicines to confront COVID-19. We also support the campaign to award the Nobel Peace Prize to the Henry Reef Brigade. This would be a fitting tribute, not only to what Cuba has meant internationally, but also to the legacy of Fidel Castro. Viva Fidel, viva la Revolución Cubana, Fidel presente.
So why a Saving Lives campaign? You're looking at a picture of a Michigan legislator, a Detroit bus driver, the 5-year-old daughter of a first responder. All of them died of COVID-19 in my city. More than 900 healthcare professionals have died of COVID-19. It did not have to be that way. And we know that from Cuba's example in how, despite the blockade, Cuba has managed to have, in a country of 11.3 million people, lost only 89 lives. And they have done this without miracle drugs, but through discipline and science and really showing that there is a way to fight the pandemic. In addition to what Cuba has done in Cuba, the medical brigades have gone all around the world, and they're slandered by the United States on a daily basis, and we're fighting back on that. We're fighting back on so many levels, and when we look at what's happening, sometimes it may seem overwhelming. But the fact of the matter is 14 US cities have called for US sanctions on Cuba to be lifted, and Cleveland is the most recent one on July 1st. Communities want to know how Cuba has managed to fight back against the pandemic. Since May 5th, a bit over 3 months, 4 city councils have called for medical collaboration with Cuba: Richmond, Berkeley, San Francisco, and Cleveland. They joined the 13 previous resolutions to end the cruel US blockade of Cuba that hurts the people on both sides of the Florida Straits. Chicago, New York, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Sacramento, Santa Rosa, all have residents who are working hard to bring resolutions forward for those cities too. Or with organized labor conventions in this season being prominent, we know that in the Washington state, AFL-CIO, a resolution is going to be presented and we expect it to be passed, supporting the Saving Lives campaign. We're adding voices who are also voices against the blockade. So the Saving Lives campaign, even though this is an election year and everything is swamped with electoral issues, the Saving Lives campaign has gained momentum, and we will be in an even stronger position with the help of others. Sean?
Solidarité Québec-Cuba, like the CNC and the NNOC, we regroup the different organizations here in Quebec. And I'm very pleased to be able to give our greetings to the ambassadors here, all the organizers, the co-chairs, and all the attendees, including our Consul General for Quebec and Eastern Canada, who is listening in. I'm going to say a few words in French for the Québécois that are listening in, and then I'll come back. Bonjour, voilà, ce soir c'est dédié surtout pour la campagne qui s'appelle Sauvons des vies. Par cette campagne, on essaie d'encourager la coopération entre Cuba et les États-Unis, premièrement, et aussi le Canada et le Québec. Déjà, il y a des campagnes pour faire signer des lettres qu'on envoie en appui à cette campagne, et aussi pour lever le blocus. Et au Québec, cette lettre a été parrainée par des médecins, des académiques, et aussi la CSN avec ses 300 000 membres. Si vous voulez aider, s'il vous plaît, allez à notre page Facebook et aussi vous pouvez nous écrire à ce courriel cableqcu@gmail.com. Nous avons des campagnes, comme il a été mentionné plus tôt, pour que les brigades Henry Reeves médicales puissent recevoir le prix Nobel, et aussi une pétition à la Chambre des communes qui a été initiée par le Comité de Québec pour la paix en Amérique latine. Vous verrez ça sur notre site, ou c'est la pétition qui s'appelle E-2586. Alors, au plaisir de vous voir. And so as I was saying with my Quebecois colleagues, what can you do to help the campaign? Well, first of all, you could reach out to your local media to promote the campaign. And if you go to our website, you will see the Saving Lives, US-Cuba Normalization.org. You will see that there are some form letters that you could use and adapt to write to the media. You can also get support by approaching your city councils, labor and community organizations, as well as medical professionals and workers. And there's also a kit for that available on our site. This was prepared by the committees from San Francisco and Richmond. And thank you for that. And especially also for anybody who would like to help with their ideas or their skills, sign up and join us in our meetings. We have meetings every Wednesday by Zoom like this, so everybody is welcome. I'd like to terminate now with a little anecdote about Fidel Castro. There's a picture that showed up a little while ago. As you know, as it was mentioned earlier, Fidel Castro went to Washington in April of 1959. Well, after that, he came up here to Montreal, and when he landed at the airport, he was greeted by many people. He was seen as the mountain revolutionary. People all knew about him. I guess that was a great period to be following Cuba. And he was going to the airport to his hotel, but he said that he wanted to go to visit a hospital called Saint Justine Hospital. This is the picture we see. Fidel Castro with the nurses and the little girl. And he met the official people there, but then he decided to break from the protocol, and he went around visiting the rooms, seeing the women, the mothers with their newborn babies. And he met a lady who spoke Spanish and talked to her. So before leaving, he came back down and he said, I've learned very much in this trip, and my idea is to go back to Cuba and build hospitals. Now, St. Justin just happened to be a brand new hospital. It had just been rebuilt. So I'm sure it had very modern equipment at that time, and he was impressed. But this goes to show how early in the Cuban Revolution, health was important. And this ties in with our Saving Lives campaign. So I'd like to finish saying that science, health needs cooperation. So we need, as was said earlier, Cuba would gain from lifting the blockade, as well as the United States would. So please, let's lift the blockade and go for cooperation between all countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Sean, to Cheryl, and to Isaac for representing our US-Cuba Normalization Conference and the Saving Lives campaign today. We hope that you will get involved. There have been links posted in the Zoom chat about how to visit our website and get more involved. I also just want to mention that as Ike said at the beginning of the webinar today, we are building still towards some form of US-Cuba Normalization Conference in November. It may be just virtual, or we're hoping for a partly live, partly virtual conference to discuss and how we are going to bring an end to the cruel and unjust US blockade on Cuba, and also to continue building this Saving Lives campaign. So we are accepting donations on our website, and this is a way to help us towards being able to put more resources into this organizing. This tile is got the information on the conference, as well as other information that you will need to make your donation. It will come down pretty quickly, so you may want to just take a photo if you've got your cell phone handy, but we will also post some of the links and information in the chat. So thank you so much. Ike, I hand it over to you for our next introductions.
Okay, I'm going to introduce the next two speakers, Don Rojas and Clever Banganay. And I'm going to introduce them together, and then they can speak back to back. So Don Rojas was press secretary for the martyred Prime Minister of Grenada, Maurice Bishop, from 1981 to 1983, the executive political editor of the Real News Network, director of communications and international relations, the Institute of Black World, and founder of the award-winning The Black World Today. And he's a longtime friend and comrade, and thank you, Don. And Don will speak first. Our next speaker after Don will be Clever Banganay. Clever is from the Friends of Cuba Society in South Africa, Focus. Clever is a Cuban-trained engineer who studied in Cuba from 1991 to 1996 during the height of the so-called special period of economic crisis and intensified U.S. economic war. Clever is a recipient of the Friendship Medal Award from the Cuban Council of State for his work in the campaign against the U.S. blockade and for the freedom of the Cuban Five. So these two very special speakers will start with Don Rojas.
Thank you very much, Comrade Ike. Good evening, sisters and brothers and comrades. I am deeply honored and privileged to join with this distinguished panel this evening, as well as with sisters and brothers, hundreds of them around the world, who are viewing this virtual event online, and who have all gathered to celebrate the birthday of the incomparable Comandante Fidel Castro, one of the greatest revolutionary leaders of our time. I also bring to this event solidarity greetings from Grenadian revolutionaries, both at home and abroad. On this occasion, my mind is filled with indelible memories of the principled internationalist solidarity that was demonstrated by Fidel in the Cuban Revolution to the Grenada Revolution that was led by Comrade Maurice Bishop from 1979 to 1983. I recall the day in early 1980 when a Cuban ship arrived in Grenada filled with brand new construction equipment, from bulldozers to cranes to earth-moving trucks, there to begin the construction of Grenada's international airport, which is today named for Comrade Maurice Bishop. Fidel and Bishop enjoyed a very close personal relationship. Many of our Cuban friends have told us that Fidel considered Bishop almost as a son. And so when Fidel asked Maurice what was Grenada's highest priority in terms of the country's economic development, he replied, the construction of an international airport. In the months following the arrival of that Cuban ship, Fidel sent to Grenada medical brigades of doctors and dentists and nurses. They were followed by teams of Cuban engineers and architects who worked alongside their Grenadian counterparts to construct the airport, as well as to construct access roads to the airport. A few months later, dozens of young Grenadians traveled to Cuba to study in Cuban universities and technical institutes, to be professionally trained in a variety of disciplines. And many Grenadian youths, many more, joined that first team in the years between 1979 and 1983. Today, many of the Cuban trained professionals are proudly serving the Grenadian people. And I'm also very pleased to say that today, there are literally hundreds of doctors and nurses from Cuba who are scattered throughout the Caribbean, assisting in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Permit me to recall the first time I had the occasion, the privilege to talk with Comandante Fidel Castro. It was on May 1st, 1981, the day, of course, celebrated around the world as International Workers' Day. And I recall very well Fidel's famous Three Giants speech, in which he talked about the three giants that are rising up at the very doorsteps of US imperialism. And of course, he was referring not only to the Cuban Revolution, but also to the Nicaraguan and the Grenadian Revolution. And in addition to Fidel, the other two main speakers on that day, of course, was President Daniel Ortega of Nicaragua and Prime Minister Maurice Bishop of Grenada. I can go on for many more minutes, but time is short. So I would just want to wrap up by saying that on this occasion, as we honor the life and legacy of Fidel Castro, I also want to honor the memory of the many Cuban internationalist workers who fought, shed their blood, and died defending themselves and defending their Grenadian comrades when the United States military, under the command of President Reagan at the time, invaded Grenada in October of 1983. On this occasion, I would like to honor their memory as well. And to say, finally, down with the illegal and immoral economic blockade of Cuba. Viva Fidel, long live the glorious Cuban Revolution. Thank you, Brother Ike.
Thank you so much, Don. And now we're going to move on to Brother Clever Bangagnani, also an old and dear friend. And thank you so much. It's very late in the morning in South Africa. Thank you, Clever, for joining us and staying with us. And you have the mic.
You're muted, Clever. just in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Perfect.
There you go.
Sorry about
You're on,
that. Sorry about that. It's embarrassing for an engineer to be struggling with the it's just to speak it because it's early in the morning here. Ambassadors, program directors, fellow panelists, and all the participants. It gives me an honor to participate in this heroic and historic virtual celebration of the 94th birthday of Comandante Fidel Castro. Please allow me to begin my input by giving a quote of our late President of the African National Congress, Oliver Tambo, when he visited Havana in September 1979. Open quote. "We extend our greetings to the Cuban people, whom we have come to know not merely by meeting them in their own country, but because they live with us in Africa. They fight with us, they die with us, they fail and win with us. They have become part of the struggling people of our continent," close quote. We arrived in Cuba in July 1991, and I had the privilege to witness the first visit of our former President Nelson Mandela when he visited Cuba in 1991, soon after his release from prison of Robben Island, where he spent 27 years, and what Fidel Castro actually called the hell. Cuba had just lost 80% of its trading partners after the collapse of the Soviet Union. If it were another country, all of us young people coming from Africa and other continents would have been asked to go back to our countries. But what Fidel said to us was that Cuba is not a rich country. We have very little because of economic blockade. We still share the little that we have with you so that you can finish your careers and go back and contribute to the development of your countries. This spirit was witnessed for the next 5.5 years that we spent in Cuba with the Cuban people in their streets, in their clubs, in their schools, in their churches, in their farms, in everywhere. This is how we remember Fidel Castro. In 1977, Comandante Fidel Castro made a decision to increase the number of enrollments of students from all over the world, especially from those that are coming from developing countries. And he converted what was known as Isla de Pinos to the Island of Youth, where thousands of youth would be trained from as low as primary education to university, all for free. By 1982, the Isla de la Juventud had more than 13,000 young people from all over the world, of which 10,000 of these were from Africa. I can say to you today that I am a product of this program that was started then by Fidel Castro in 1977. This is how we remember Fidel Castro. We cannot forget the Kasinga massacre, where hundreds of women and children were killed by the South African Defense Force on the 4th of March, 1978. A few weeks after the massacre, 600 Namibian children, most of whom were survivors of the Kasinga massacre, arrived in Cuba to study. Cuba opened its doors widely and generously to the Namibian refugees. This is how we remember Fidel Castro. As from then, thousands and thousands of young people came to study in Cuba. Cuba has been at the side of of the people of Africa since the early days of the revolution. At the most critical moments of the struggles for the freedom and justice in this continent, the people of Africa have been able to count on the solidarity of the Cuban people. We have been ready to share their limited resources, their sweat and their blood. Cuba's role in support of the liberation of Southern Africa at the cost of over 2,000 deaths and the engagement of over 350,000 voluntary combatants in over 15 years was a crucial step to help safeguard the territorial integrity of Angola, to pave the way for the independence of Namibia, and to defeat apartheid. Thousands of Africans have been trained as professionals in Cuba, while hundreds of thousands of Cubans, mainly youth, have spent critical periods of their lives in African soil as internationalists, both in a military capacity, but also as doctors, as teachers, as engineers, and other civilian activities without claiming wealth, reward, or retribution. It has been a history of unique and unbending solidarity that registers in the history of the continent as the most loyal expression of friendship. Cuba has undertaken solidarity not as a means of foreign policy, but as a moral and fraternal commitment to the people of Africa. Solidarity with Cuba is therefore a moral duty for the peoples of Africa. It must take the form of constant education for the younger generation, and it must be an active engagement of public support for Cuba and of the rejection of the US-imposed economic blockade, to the continued occupation of the Cuban territory by a military base in Guantanamo, and to the constant plans of political subversion in all its forms. History has shown and validated the significance of solidarity as a form of struggle. As we all remember, the release by the United States government of the Cuban 5 anti-terrorist heroes on the 17th December 2014 was a major political accomplishment, resulting, among other factors, from the political pressure achieved by international solidarity. We celebrate Fidel Castro's outstanding contribution as a world revolutionary leader, as a committed internationalist, and as a statesman truly devoted to the aspirations of freedom, social justice, equality for the people of Cuba and for millions of people of the developing world. As a loyal friend of Africa in general and South Africa in particular, Fidel Castro led the people of Cuba in the most significant international contribution to the liberation of the African continent, with his conviction and unity and solidarity as a tool of victory. Fidel Castro's lessons of unity, solidarity, and commitment to revolutionary principles are a source of inspiration to today's young generations of Africans and all other youth in the world. His legacy must be carried by the revolutionary and progressive movements of the continent and the world. His profound political ideas must be widely shared, understood. Among others, we list that only socialism can ensure the conditions of survival of the human species, that the struggle against imperialism is a constant task day by day under changing conditions, that imperialism will never truly accept sovereignty, self-determination, and realization of social justice in the developing world, that imperialism will go to any extreme and will use any resources to keep the developing world under its yoke, that socialism, to be real, must practice solidarity and internationalism, that another world, a better and peaceful one in harmony with nature, is possible, and that the oppressed have the right and the capacity to rebel against injustice. Revolutionary and progressive movements around the world, as well as and individual commitment to peace, to the respect of international law and justice must mobilize in solidarity to defend Cuba. In popular activism and social movements, but we need to be re-energized. The Cuban Revolution continues to be a beacon of resistance against ambitions of transnational capitalism and imperialism. It continues to symbolize the hope that a better world is possible. It has become the revolutionary process of all of us, and it is our common duty to come out and defend it. While reorganizing the public declaration statements are important, we must ensure that our words and commitments materialize in the form of practical, tangible actions of solidarity. In this regard, we undertake to strengthen the effort to ask the American people to pressurize their government and Congress to go back to the process started by President Obama to normalize the US-Cuba relations. We demand once again that the US remove the illegal, cruel, inhumane, unilateral economic, financial, and commercial blockade on Cuba and unconditionally return the soil of Guantanamo Bay back to Cuba. We reiterate and support the call that has been coming all over the world of awarding the Nobel Prize to the Henry Reeve Medical Brigade, which today we know is being deployed to more than 23 countries around the world to fight COVID-19 pandemic. It is these acts and these issues that shows us that the legacy of Fidel Castro must always be maintained and we must defend it. And therefore we say, Amandla, patria o muerte, venceremos. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Clever and Don Rojas. We're going to now have a short musical interlude with Brother Raymond. He's a singer, songwriter, a musician, poet, translator, and a member of the Artistes pour la Paix du Québec Board of Directors. As an anti-imperialist and social justice activist, he is a longtime supporter of the Cuban Revolution. And after Normand finishes his performance, we will move on with the rest of our main program and other excellent speakers coming up. Okay, Normand, you have the virtual mic. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, bonsoir, buenas noches. The song I'm going to present is in honor of Fidel Castro. It's called Alas de Libertad. The lyrics is from Nilson Cepeda Donoso, a Chilean friend of mine, and I made the music. Si la libertad es amor, tú viviste amando. Si también es padecer, tú viviste padeciendo. Fidel Castro, tú viviste padeciendo. Camino fue una estela de brasas encendidas, pero el dolor de los pobres impulsó tu franco andar, impulsó tu franco andar, Fidel Castro. No podemos olvidarte, ilustre americano, hoy las huellas de tu frente son las puertas, son la luz. Mi canto es tu canto, es nuestro canto, es la dignidad en tus alas de libertad, en tus alas de libertad. Si Cuba fue tu sangre, América tu estrella, bajo el cielo azul magenta, se oye el trino de tu voz, Fidel Castro, se oye el trino de tu voz. No hay colores en la piel, ni fronteras en el alma, la dignidad se ha hecho fuerza en tus alas de libertad, en tus alas de libertad, Fidel Castro. No podemos olvidarte, ilustre americano, hoy las huellas de tu frente son las puertas, son la luz. Mi canto es tu canto, es nuestro canto, es la dignidad en tus alas de libertad, en tus alas de libertad. No podemos olvidarte, ilustre americano, hoy las huellas de tu frente son las puertas, son la luz. Mi canto es tu canto, es nuestro canto, es la dignidad en tus alas de libertad, en tus alas de libertad. So, Wings of Liberty.
Muchas gracias. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup, Normand Raymond. Really fantastic to have you here with us on this wonderful celebration of the life and legacy of Comandante Fidel Castro. So I'm going to go now to our next speakers. I want to let all of our attendees know that we have 3 more speakers today in the program, as well as more poetry coming up in this celebration for Fidel Castro. And I think that it's going to be a really dynamic and interesting continuation of the event. So I hope that you can all stay with us. I would now like to invite to the virtual microphone Mary Alice Waters. She is the president of Pathfinder Press, a major U.S. and international publisher of speeches and writings of Fidel Castro and other working class leaders, from Malcolm X to Farrell Dobbs to Thomas Sankara and Vilma S. Bean. Waters has edited or written some 30 books on the Cuban Revolution and its communist example. Please welcome with me, Mary Alice Waters.
Thank you, Tamara. And thank you really to all of those of you who are participating from all over the world, including as far away, or perhaps I should say as nearby as the Philippines. It's really a privilege to be here and to be part of this program this evening, even if we can't all see each other. Fidel Castro's leadership of the toilers of Cuba and the world was unlike that of any other man or woman in the 20th or 21st centuries except for one. Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the Bolshevik Revolution of October 1917. The central leaders of the two great socialist revolutions of the 20th century stand apart. Fidel enjoyed an unparalleled respect, both because he earned it and because he never abused it. It was earned by shouldering leadership responsibility over decades of class combat. Fidel used the trust he enjoyed not to simply administer, but to lead politically. He was famous, and of course, some would say infamous, for his speeches lasting many hours, given to crowds of hundreds of thousands of Cuban working people standing in the blazing sun or under pouring rain, who hung on every word. And that rapport between Fidel and the humble, toiling peoples of Cuba was something his enemies could never even begin to comprehend. In those moments, he drew from his own experiences and understanding of the laws of history, of science, and of the class struggle to broaden the horizon of the Cuban masses, which is the real meaning of the word culture. He led them to see themselves as actors, not subjects, actors in the world, accomplishing what others deemed impossible. Most important was Fidel's ability to convey to the working people of Cuba and to all of us what we must be willing to confront and change in ourselves in order to organize and fight effectively against a powerful ruling class and its spokespeople who try to teach us the opposite, who try to convince us that our worth and our capacities are so limited that we must accept and submit to the exploitation, oppression, and compulsion on which the dog-eat-dog laws of capitalist rule depend. The social crisis for working people the world over that has been precipitated by the coronavirus pandemic serves to underscore that the example of the Cuban Revolution isn't limited to the healthcare and education that the manner of which Cuba upholds in practice as a human right across the world. However important that example is, which numerous of the speakers this evening, including Ambassador Vidal, explained so well. Here, as we see our loved ones condemned to die in nursing homes, deliberately turned into death chambers, and in overwhelmed hospital wards, we are taught once again that health and education are class questions, determined by the class that holds state power and its values. Cuba's example today is possible only because of the decisive revolutionary socialist victory conquered 60 years ago under Fidel's leadership. And that, above all, is why we pay tribute to him tonight. There are many moments over those decades when Fidel's leadership was decisive, and each of us might pick a different one and each would be valid. But no turning point was more important than 1986, when Fidel initiated what was known as the process of rectification of errors and negative tendencies. That historic effort over a period of 5 years remobilized and remoralized Cuban working people as they joined together to build literally hundreds and thousands of housing units, clinics, schools, childcare centers, and much more. In the process, they proved to themselves they could reverse the erosion of political confidence and their self-confidence that accompanied elements of reliance on capitalist administrative methods copied from what was falsely labeled European socialism. The accomplishments of those years in Cuba were inseparable from the historic victory in Quito Carnival and the defeat of the South African apartheid regime. But not only that, They were equally decisive in the capacity of the Cuban working people to confront and overcome the hardships of the special period of the 1990s, when many believed that Cuba was simply a tropical version of the Soviet Union and would suffer a similar fate. Tamara, in her opening remarks, quoted Fidel's words to the closing session of the 2016 Congress of the Cuban Communist Party, only a few months before his death. And in that brief talk, Fidel covered a great deal. He posed the question to the delegates, why did I become a socialist? Or more plainly, why did I become a communist? And he went on to sketch a few of the most pressing crises facing humanity, including the expanding desert and drought across the Sahel in North Africa, and the destructive power of modern weaponry, which he said could make human life on Earth's surface impossible. And it's worth noting on the 75th anniversary of the horror of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that the words of Fidel are especially timely. We have never considered producing nuclear weapons, Fidel had told a gathering at the University of Havana a few years earlier, because we don't need them. And it's not because the revolution faces no enemies or military threats, he added, unnecessarily probably. The reason, he said, is that we already possess a weapon as powerful as nuclear power. And that is the immense justice for which we are struggling. And I will end on this point. Several weeks before the 2016 Party Congress, Fidel had penned his powerful reply to the speech in Havana by US President Barack Obama, who had told the Cuban people, it is now time to forget the past. And as Fidel said or wrote, I suppose all of us were at risk of a heart attack upon hearing such words. And he went on, and I quote Fidel, nobody should be under the illusion that the people of this dignified and selfless country will renounce the glory, the right, or the spiritual wealth they have gained from the development of education, science, and culture. And I warn, Fidel concluded, we are capable of producing the food and material riches we need with the efforts and intelligence of our people. Now, our strongest tribute to Fidel this evening is to affirm that supporters of the Cuban Revolution around the world will be guided by the course embodied in those words of Fidel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary Alice Waters, for being with us today and for sharing those words on the life and legacy of Comandante Fidel. We're now going on to our second to last speaker, which is Vijay Prashad. And he is a very honored guest again as well with us here today. He's an Indian historian, a journalist, a commentator, and Marxist intellectual. He is also the executive director of the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research and the chief editor of Leftward Books. So we're really honored to have with us here today, Vijay.
It's great to be here, comrades. Very happy to be with you. I bring great and warm greetings from my team at Leftward Books in New Delhi and my team from Tricontinental Institute for Social Research from South Africa, India, Argentina, and Brazil. It's a great honor for me to be here today. I join you to celebrate the life of Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro, a human being. Fidel Castro, one of the most formed human beings, a socialist human being, the highest form of human being, a socialist, Fidel Castro. I was born on the 14th of August, and I used to often tell my mother, just one day, you could have had me one day earlier. and I would share my birthday with the greatest man living. And she would say, well, you were a cesarean. And I suppose I could have organized it, but it didn't work. And so I can say that I was born the day after Fidel Castro. It's an honor to have been born within proximity of the birthday of, as I said, a human being, a socialist, which is the highest form of human being. The manifesto of the Cuban Revolution, to my mind, is that amazing speech that Fidel Castro gave after he had been arrested during the Moncada barracks uprising. You see, one of the geniuses of Fidel Castro, comrades, is that his real dynamism came out not at a time of victory, but at a time of defeat. His greatest speeches to us, the legacy of Fidel, is looking defeat straight in the eye. He was able to see where the dialectic had whipped. The speech, 1953, which we know by that great line, history will absolve us. And then the speech after the sugarcane harvest of 1970, the failed harvest, an incredible speech where he comes before the people and says, I am ready to be removed from office. And people say, no, 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 no. And he says, we have made mistakes. As his comrade Amilcar Cabral had said at the Tricontinental Conference in 1966, tell no lies, claim no easy victories. Fidel never lied. He came to the people and said, look, we failed. We couldn't do it. And the people said, we trust you. But he said, we failed. We have to understand the dialectic. We have to understand the great social processes of our time. And then, of course, his tremendous speeches in the special period. Again, looking history directly in the eye, Fidel Castro said, we're going to get through this. Why are we going to get through this? Because let's go back to the manifesto of the Cuban Revolution, the speech we know as history will absolve me. Oh, actually, I prefer to say history will absolve us, because he was not alone there. And Fidel was not an individual. Fidel was a collective individual. He was a man of the crowd, the man of the people. History will absolve us. What is that great line? You see, he says there, and I'm going to read it if you don't mind. He says, the first popularly elected government would have to respect them. In other words, respect the great advances, promises that the government has made. The first popularly elected government would have to respect them, not only because of moral obligation to the nation. And here's the line, comrades, just pay attention to this line, because this is the manifesto of the Cuban Revolution. Not only because of moral obligation to the nation, but because when people achieve something they have yearned for throughout generations, because when people achieve something they have yearned for throughout generations, no force in the world is capable of taking it away again. Because when people achieve something they have yearned for throughout generations, no force in the world is capable of taking it away again. That, comrades, that exact line, that sentiment is the manifesto of the Cuban Revolution. When people achieve something they have yearned for throughout generations, no force in the world is capable of taking it away again. On the one side, once the Cuban people liberated themselves, on the one side, you had humanity, you had the forces of anti-colonialism, you had the ambitions to build socialism. And on the other side, you had the wretchedness of imperialism, the decay of imperialism. The decay of imperialism, which might have the capacity to bomb you, to starve you, to destroy your life, but it doesn't have the capacity to capture your imagination. It will never defeat you, because the actual dialectic which Fidel identified in that manifesto of the Cuban Revolution, that actual dialectic is between imperialism and humanity. That's the real contradiction. It's between imperialism and humanity. Which camp, comrades, do you want to belong to? Do you want to belong to the camp of imperialism, or the camp of humanity. A poet from near Delhi, Akbar Allahabadi, used to sing, "Aadmi tha badi mushkil se insaan hua." Aadmi tha badi mushkil se insaan hua. We were born people. With great difficulty, we became human. The Cuban Revolution is a revolution that brought humanity to the planet Earth. It made humanity manifest in life, which is why it affirmed life through its doctors, which is why those doctors, more than anybody else, deserve the Nobel Prize. It affirmed life through the doctors. It spends its social resources, the resources of the Cuban citizens, to affirm life, not to build a military force, not to bomb Iraq, not to sanction Venezuela, not to do a coup d'etat against our brother comrade Evo Morales Ayma of Bolivia. Not for that. That's not what Cuba affirms life for, affirms humanity for. It's imperialism that affirms death. It's imperialism that attempts to suffocate our comrades in Venezuela. Cuba affirms life. Comrades, stand for life. Stand for humanity. With great difficulty, we have become humans only because of the experience of the Cuban Revolution. The Cuban Revolution is synonymous for humanity. Defend the Cuban Revolution. Join together to defeat the decayed forces of imperialism. Viva Fidel. Venceremos.
Thank you so much to Vijay Prashad for those very strong and powerful words of Fidel. The chat is going wild, Vijay. People are saying that it's possible that your birthday, well ahead in India, might have been behind in Cuba based on, time zones. So they really want you to look into that and think maybe with Cuba time, you could claim August 13th as your birthday. So thank you so much for that. We're going in now to our second to last poet, and then to our last speaker, the fantastic Gail Walker. So please make sure to stick around as we wrap up this phenomenal program celebrating Comandante Fidel Castro. I'd like to invite to the microphone now Elle Jones. She's a poet, professor, activist, and author of Live from the African Resistance from Roseway Press. Her work focuses on social justice issues such as feminism, prison abolition, anti-racism, and decolonization. We recently had Elle Jones on the Canadian Network on Cuba's July 26th celebration, and she was a program favorite. So super honored to have her here with us again today. Welcome, Elle Jones.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. And thank you so much for all your wonderful, inspiring words and for your presence. I wrote this poem for today. Dear Fidel, this is a birthday card from the wretched of the earth. So I'm sorry if it's birthed in blood or written in the drops of sweat from the brows of the ones who dream of enough bread and not of cake. This is a bringing into life that never stops. This card is reaping the crops you sowed, and it's getting ahead of itself because it is always imagining a better, and a better tomorrow. You may not be able to make the letters out because this is a tribute from the ones denied education in countries without your literacy programs that allow the neglected to make it out of poverty. So instead of happy birthday, it says hasta la victoria siempre with a postscript. We believe the worker has an equal stake in the society they labor to build. This is a birthday card, stilled from the ache in the belly of the planet's hungry, so they will not wish you steak for birthday dinner, but invite you to humbly share their rice and beans. And the message on the napkin folded into a card says, we will not leave your vision unfulfilled. This card is the hallmark of resistance. Greetings from the ones who get no break, working 15 hours a day beside a sewing machine. The teens at border crossings and refugees in container ships seeking escape, who send the message, thank you for jolting the world awake. Thank you for shaking our foundations and in the rubble finding a place where equality is still a possibility and where the ideal will never die. And FYI, we are tired of fake promises of liberation. We want the real thing. Born from cane fields and street vendors in the heat of Black August and the drumbeat of emancipation. These are our wishes when we blow the candles out because there's no electricity and we have to save. We have to save and be saved. This is a birthday card from the crater left after the invasion, and it echoes. It echoes with the news not heard on network TV. You can label it propaganda if you like, or you can call it the unheard cries of the majority making less than $1.25 a day. This is a card the CIA is trying to erase. And it is not sold in Miami, but it is scraped together from tips of hotel workers and your mommy's 7-day-a-week job as a domestic and her layoff notice when her knees gave out and made from recycled trash in the dump where children play. Down here, among the unclean, where schools don't have a latrine and the politicians come to power and are only figurines, the bombs fall on the hospital stoked by puppet regimes and they tell us revolution is just a whisper because its goals remain unseen. So this is a birthday card from the hearts that keep the flame burning, from those who are not turning away. The sparks that light up police stations and say, take your knee off our neck. And Houston Che Guevara and Black Lives Matter tees chanting death to imperialism and no justice, no peace, while corporate execs rake in another bailout check and the illusion of choice extends for another election run. But we are not done. And we are sending you a message saying, Fidel, we do not forget your name. So this is a birthday card from the bus drivers who refused to deliver protesters to jail. No, the revolution did not fail. It is in the defiant fists of the riders being arrested in Zimbabwe, the torch handed from Mandela shouting Viva la Cuba Libre upon his release from his apartheid cell. This is a birthday card heard in the rebel yell and in the sound of the colonizer's statue breaking as it fell. This is a birthday card from all who go without presents because we believe in a better future, a dream sutured into us at the hands of Cuban doctors, from the peasants and ghetto residents and political dissidents convicted on manufactured evidence. This is happy birthday sung by a chorus of minimum wage workers while they cover their mouths because their corporate boss denies them PPE. No, we are not free. But this card will not be delivered to you by an underpaid worker at Amazon. This card was not bought in Babylon, but created in the dawn of a better world. It unfurled in the flags of regiments, marching through Africa in the smoke of Zapatista camps. It is not in an envelope because it cannot be contained. It only unfolds, it unfolds, it is unfolding. In the eviction notices and summonses to court, but it is unfolding. In the bodies lying on the concrete, it is unfolding beyond death because it cannot die. This is a birthday card deferred for the day we will be celebrating together in freedom when the battle is won. And comrades drop their weapons and with tears flowing down their faces, hold hands and say, we have unfolded. We are unfolding. And the message, it still lives on. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, L. Jones. Go ahead, Ike.
Okay, well, we want to end this segment of our speakers with, as Tamara said, the wonderful Gail Walker, our dear sister Gail Walker. Gail is the executive director of IFCO Pastors for Peace, which I always like to say is at the moral center of our movement. And the work that Gail and IFCO have done has been referred to by a number of speakers today with Elam and so on. And so I'm just going to give the virtual mic over to Gail. Thank you, Gail, for participating with us tonight.
Thank you, Ike and Tamara and everyone for helping to organize this tremendous tribute to our dear brother, Fidel Castro Ruz. In my capacity as director of IFCO Pastors for Peace and co-chair of the National Network on Cuba, I I want to thank all the organizers for this opportunity to participate in this, beautiful tribute to Fidel on the occasion of his 94th birthday, along with our distinguished international guests. Friends, I know that it's late, and there have been so many beautiful remembrances of our beloved Fidel Castro that have been shared this evening. I just want to share that I know that those who have had the opportunity to meet him, to hear him speak, to witness the working of his incredible mind, were all touched by this once in a lifetime visionary leader. His intellect was incredible. He could speak for hours, as many of us know, on end with no notes, and make just, an incredible circle, powerful connections to the multitude of issues. His astute knowledge, his brilliant use of facts to convey messages, whether about history or about the Cuban Revolution, or about the challenges that are confronting our planet, or about the overall struggles against injustice. He was able to do so with laser point clarity. And those of us who heard him speak during his last visit to the United States in 2000 at the historic Riverside Church, he spoke for 4 or 5 hours, we were riveted to our seats, knowing that we were hearing a master orator eloquently sharing just his profound knowledge. There are so many things that have already been said about our beloved Fidel, but I want to use my short time to reference one of his many living legacies referred to by Ambassador Cabañas, and that is the creation of the Latin American School of Medicine, known by its acronym ELAM. It was the forward vision of Fidel, Comandante Fidel Castro, to take a naval barracks and convert it into an internationally renowned medical training facility. And thanks to that vision, tens of thousands of young people from more than 125 nations, including the United States, are now practicing medicine in underserved communities across the globe. In the year 2000, at that historic Riverside Church meeting, Fidel offered free medical school scholarships to qualified candidates from all regions of the United States, from low-income communities and communities of color who would not otherwise have access to medical education. That was the gift, with the only obligation being that those scholarship recipients would return and practice in medically underserved communities in the US. And since that year, 2000, under the direction of our founding director and my father, Reverend Lucius Walker, IFCO has been honored to take on the role of facilitating the process for young people to participate in the scholarship program. To date, as the ambassador explained, Cuba has graduated 196 doctors from the US, nearly 200 doctors. The very country that has imposed a genocidal blockade against it for more than 6 decades. Following the tradition started by Fidel, President Miguel Díaz-Canel visited Riverside Church in 2018. And among the most moving events during his speech was his shout out to the dozens of ELAM graduates in their white lab coats sitting in the front rows, asking to take a photo with them. President Miguel Díaz-Canel began his address by reflecting on the past. He said, "I only knew the very beautiful Riverside Church with its Gothic-styled spire by photographs and stories of that intense night in the year 2000 when the hospitable friends from Harlem gave a mass welcome of more than 3,000 people to our leader and his delegation." He said, "It is fair to say that the program for the training of young Americans from the poorest districts of this great nation at the Latin American School of Medicine, ELAM, was actually born here." And that beautiful gift that started with Fidel's vision and continues thanks to the generosity of the Cuban government and the Cuban people benefits not just the scholarship recipients, but the communities that those Cuban trained doctors are serving, as referenced by Ambassador Vidal. From Standing Rock to the front lines of the fight against coronavirus, we in the United States are the benefactors of Cuba's longstanding commitment to medical internationalism. The US government may have shamelessly rejected Cuba's beautiful offer to send doctors in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina to New Orleans or to Puerto Rico after it was viciously slammed by Hurricane Maria. But today, Cuba is beginning to revolutionize healthcare in the US, one ELAM grad at a time. And we are immensely, immensely grateful to Fidel for planting those seeds of solidarity that are now bearing fruit. We just, as the Ambassador Cabañas shared a virtual graduation celebration with the graduates and their families just a few days ago. And what a tremendous memory it was for us to be reminded of Fidel. For this, we thank Fidel, and we commit to continuing to stand in solidarity with our Cuban family. Before I close, as a friend of the Cuba Solidarity Movement, I want to extend a special thank you to our dear friends at Casa de las Americas, who have been a leading voice in our solidarity efforts for so many years. And once again, I want to lift up the campaign to make visible the work of the Henry Reeve Brigade and to urge the Nobel Peace Committee to consider bestowing the Nobel Prize to Cuba. Go to cubanobel.org for more information. And finally, I want to just say thank you, Fidel. Thank you for your beautiful example and your spirit that lives on in the Cuban child, that lives on in those of us who struggle for justice, that lives on in those that reject imperialism and are committed to building a world based on fairness and equity and determined to stand up for dignity and self-determination against all odds. Viva Fidel, Fidel vive y la lucha sigue. Long live Cuba, long live the Cuban Revolution, and long live Fidel. Thank you. You all got me going to church.
That's right. Thank you, Phil.
That's what happens when you put me at the end. I'm gonna get excited. I got myself excited. All right.
That was awesome, Gail.
All right. Welcome. You're welcome.
So we're going to make a few announcements now, and then we're going to have our last poet, Catherine Beeman, who's amazing, and you need to stay tuned for, as well as some greetings from some important organizations. Very brief. Ike, you want to give our first announcement?
Okay, give me a second here. The first announcement is
Saving Lives campaign.
Saving Lives campaign. Sign on to our campaign on our website, which will be posted in the Zoom chat. It's there. Get involved in our next meeting to build this campaign for further medical collaboration between the US, Cuba, and Canada. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Tamara.
Awesome. Also, this Saturday, August 15th at 10 a.m. Havana time, the FMC invites you to the virtual forum dedicated to the 60th anniversary of the Federation of Cuban Women and to the legacy of Vilma and Fidel. It will be transmitted through YouTube and Facebook. Link and also some social media hashtags to promote the event will be posted in the Zoom chat.
The next announcement is for Monday, August 17th. That will be the next virtual picket against the U.S. blockade on Cuba, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, organized by the Canadian Network on Cuba. There is a poster coming up, and the information will be on the CNC website, which will be posted in the Zoom chat. There it is.
Awesome. Also, on Thursday, August 20th, Vancouver Communities in Solidarity with Cuba invites everyone to our celebration of 60 years of the Cuban Federation of Women at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time. featuring speakers live from Cuba, from the Federation of Cuban Women, the Cuban Institute of Friendship with the Peoples, as well as Cuban artists, and time for question and answer, along with Cuban Ambassador Josefina Vidal, who spoke so wonderfully today. We have registration open on our website, www.vancubasolidarity.com, and more information will be in the Zoom chat.
Saturday, August 29th, 25th Annual Toronto Cuba Friendship Day at Toronto City Hall. Because of COVID-19, this event is restricted to the 4:30 p.m. Cuban flag raising. There is a poster coming up, and the info will be on the CNC website posted in the Zoom chat. Tamara?
Thank you. On Saturday, September 19th, there will be a webinar at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time for the 60th anniversary of Comandante Fidel Castro and the Cuban delegation's arrival in New York City for the 15th session of the UN General Assembly. This event, of course, marks the very important meeting between Comandante Fidel Castro and Malcolm X at the Teresa Hotel. And we hope that you will join this event organized by Rosemary Mealy, author of the book Fidel and Malcolm, Memories of a Meeting. You can see the poster is there, and there'll be more information in the Zoom chat.
Okay, and the last announcement is for Saturday, September 26th, 8 p.m. Save the date, 15 years of solidarity with the world. Join the Nobel Peace Prize for Cuban Doctors Committee to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the Henry Reef Brigade, with Cuban health professionals working on the front lines of the pandemic. That'll be a very important webinar, and make sure you put all of these in your save the date. Okay, so we're going to have a couple some poetry that Tamara's going to announce, and we have two more solidarity messages from Casa de las Americas, the oldest Cuban American solidarity group in the United States, and the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So stay tuned for those. They're both very short and very excellent, and our poetry, and then.
Sorry, Ike. We also have Alicia Rivera here, who's going to give short greetings from the LA US Hands Off Cuba Committee as well. So I want to introduce our poetess, Catherine Beeman. I had the honor of meeting Catherine for the first time probably about 15 years ago in Montreal at a Cuba Solidarity meeting discussing how we could free our 5 Cuban heroes. I know she's a longtime Cuba Solidarity organizer, but also a very talented poet. She's a member of La Table de Concertation de Solidarité Québec-Cuba and a founding member of Le Chapitre Québécois du Réseau des Intellectuels, Artistes et Mouvements Sociaux pour la Défense de l'Humanité, or the Network in Defense of Humanity. She's also a member and contributing editor of the Canada-Cuba Literary Alliance, or Alianza Literaria Canada-Cuba. So I hand over the virtual microphone to you now, Catherine.
Thank you all very much for having me. It's an honor to follow all the heart and beauty that came before. I'm going to read 3 short poems. The first I wrote for Fidel's 80th birthday in 2006. If you remember, it was celebrated in December that year. It starts with an epigraph by Roland Rodriguez, Levantar la piel de la realidad, to lift the skin of reality. 80 years more, a birthday poem for Fidel Castro Ruz, December 2006. In Santa Clara's monument for Che, rests Tanya's bracelet from Bolivia, a silver curved presence of living wrist and risk. Here she is, near the grainy, uncredited black and white photos of compañeros in the Sierra. Who took these, I ask? They did, the guide answers. Bones of the past, scraps of chance soaked in tenderness. Fidel, seen from below, from afar, from this December, Grandma Landing appears the signal flare, lighting our generations, lifting the skin of reality. And next is an excerpt from a long historical poem by James Cotcroft, a number of the members of the Table de Concertation de Solidarité, a great defender of the Cuban Revolution and Latin America, who physically left us last year. We often bounced poems and ideas off each other. It was originally called New Poem for Fidel on the occasion of his 90th birthday. I suggested he call it Praxis. Without culture, no freedom is possible. Fidel expands it, lives it, practices. Implicit in this praxis, utopian realistic, full of experimentation, high moral standards, internationalism, honest humility, our pluralism, and a recognition that peoples must make their revolutions tuned to their own cultures and circumstances. Neither a universal formula nor an absolute model. Revolutionary praxis is a process of learning as we go along, incorporating struggles for peace, social justice, gender and ethnic equality, respect for diverse social, sexual preferences, all human rights, and the defense of Pachamama. Implicit is the necessity to think, create ideas for new socialisms of the future, since without ideas, without culture, no freedom is possible. I still thought it was more of a lyrical essay than a poem, so some months later, I wrote Praxis, or Practice 2, for Fidel, 2017. Giving your whole heart, seven-fingered every time, anything else unthinkable, calls up creativity, opens gates to the impossible possible. So many dances, so much music, as in wushu, converts enemy ferocity into triumph. With 7 rifles, wins the war, asks the right questions, learns from error even more than success. Finally, outside Holguin, they're finishing repairs to the central highway by which Fidel will pass. Even my ashes serve, he says, each ash smiling from the urn. Now, for whom the bell tolls is not the question, but who tolls the bell, the ropes in our hands. Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you so much to Catherine. Ike is now going to introduce our final 2 video greetings and also our final greeting from Los Angeles.
Okay, I guess we can start with the video. The first video is from the All African People's Party, read by Jamila Gordon, I believe. We have that?
Greetings, my name is Onya Sanu. I'm an organizer with the All African People's Revolutionary Party, speaking to you from occupied Tiwa territory, also known as Albuquerque, New Mexico. I am very grateful for the opportunity to give a statement on behalf of our organization on the absolute giant of a man that was Fidel Castro. The Pan-African movement and the APRP stand in unconditional solidarity with the Cuban Revolution, because the Cuban Revolution stood in unconditional solidarity with us. Not only was it waged by African people on that island, but after they won their liberation, after they won their independence, after they were able to build socialism, they weren't just content to stay in Cuba and ignore the rest of the world. Instead, under the leadership of Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, they chose to assist liberation struggles all over the world, including all over Africa. And so Fidel Castro, as a man, as a symbol, as a leader, embodies that internationalism of the Cuban Revolution, embodies that deep humanism of the Cuban Revolution. Fidel Castro, especially as someone, speaking from the United States, snakes represents a form of leadership that is extremely rare. That's not just about dominance over people, but it's about collective advancement and accountability and humanism and solidarity and love. He really, really provided the world a model of leadership that capitalism have made extremely rare. And so we must celebrate him. We must celebrate him. We must honor him, especially in the United States, where we hear nothing but lies about him, nothing but lies about what he did for Cuba, nothing but lies about what the Cuban Revolution actually was and what it was accomplished. So we, as people who stand in solidarity with the Cuban Revolution, who move in solidarity with the Cuban Revolution, must uplift the legacy of Fidel Castro, must never allow any lie to go unchallenged about Fidel Castro. We love and we honor Fidel Castro. We love and we honor Cuba. And the Cuban Revolution embodies the possibility of socialism and embodies the world that can be built once people come together collectively, once people decide to be free, once people move in a spirit of humanism and solidarity. So I deeply respect and appreciate Fidel Castro. The All African People's Revolutionary Party deeply respects and honors Fidel Castro. We study him, we learn from his example, we seek to continue his work in this world and to bring that model of liberation to the African continent and to African people around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that beautiful statement, and I apologize for getting the name wrong from the APRP. Our next video is from Casa de las Americas, which was a group that existed in New York and the East Coast before the revolution, doing fundraising and touring Fidel in Eastern New York, and was an organization of Cuban Americans living in New York and in the United States that supported the Cuban Revolution, that supported the July 26th movement, and supported Fidel. And that continuity has continued of that group, and they have a very beautiful message for tonight's event. So that's written by Nancy Cabrero, our dear sister.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy and honored to participate in this extraordinary celebration of the life and legacy of Fidel Castro Ruz. Comandante Fidel passed on November 25th, 2016, to another existence which doesn't allow us to physically see or hear him in the way we once did. Nonetheless, his revolutionary and socialist ideas live on as achievements that could be experienced in this life. I was fortunate to meet Fidel during his last visit to New York City in September of 2000. I was present and heard him speak at Jimmy's Bronx Cafe, the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem, Riverside Church, and at the Cuban Mission in Manhattan, where he met exclusively with members of Casa de las Americas. At every forum, Fidel approached the lectern from which he spoke with great confidence. His message radiated with the magnificence of its truth. I also witnessed how he was received with exuberant cheers and screams and hundreds of waving hands, many of which fervently waved Cuban flags. Each time, his message resonated with us. He said, "The world is undergoing a catastrophic situation. Don't believe the experts who feign optimism and ignore the cruel realities of the developing world. I now see how 20 years ago, Fidel had a clear understanding of the true evils of the world and saw where we were headed. He called the United States economic sanctions against Cuba a criminal embargo and a violation of human rights. Cuban citizens continue to endure the great injustice of the US imposed embargo on them. I believe the greatest way to honor Comandante Fidel today would be to first and foremost do everything that we can to bring an end to the cruel embargo. I believe he would also want us to understand that, very contrary to the propaganda we receive, Fidel Castro is not the devil he's said to be. His goals have always aligned with world peace and the proper treatment of the poor. Today, Casa de las Americas says, "Happy birthday, Fidel." We see you and feel you in lessons received in revolutionary and socialist Cuba. Comandante Fidel Castro, presente. Viva Cuba revolucionaria. Gracias.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much to both the Casa de las Americas and the AAPRP for those greetings. We were meant to have Alicia Rivera from the LA US Hands Off Cuba Committee speak and give some greetings at the end here, but unfortunately it seems she's had some internet issues. She's no longer online with us. So we are going to move into our closing now. And I'll let Ike speak first.
Well, that was an excellent program. We're very proud to have pulled it off. I want to thank all of the participants. I want to thank Brother Cesar Chavez, Cesar Sanchez, who put together the beautiful publicity and manages the website that I hope everybody gets on and gets active in your area and works to end the blockade. Go ahead, Tamara. You got the last word.
So it's been a tremendous honor for all of us to be here with you all today. And actually, if all of our panelists wanted to turn on their cameras, we can do kind of a group photo, any of the panelists who are still on, and we'll take a group screenshot here. Again, it's been a real pleasure to come together with so many distinguished guests from continents all over the world in order to celebrate the life and legacy of Comandante Fidel Castro. I really think that we have not only been able to honor his legacy, but really to delve into so many aspects of his leadership and their impact on Cuba today and on the international situation as we combat this global pandemic that is COVID-19. And we see the tremendous leadership of Cuba and Cuban doctors around the world. Of course, our duty as Cuba Solidarity organizers and as supporters and as guests is to take these words and take this inspiration into our future work. And of course, as Ike said, that's our work to end the criminal US blockade against Cuba. And that's also our work to make sure that the Nobel Peace Prize Committee hears our loud and resounding voices that the Cuban doctors deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. We know that this prize has its faults, and I very much appreciated our compañero from the MST who called them the old gray men deciding on the Nobel Peace Prize. But we have a duty to call on the world to mobilize to demand that the Cuban doctors receive the Nobel Peace Prize because they deserve it, because they are working towards peace, and because their work is under attack consistently by the Trump administration. And so we have on so many levels, so much work ahead of us. As you saw from all of our announcements, there's so many events coming up and actions that you can participate in, petitions for you to sign, books for you to buy. So please make sure that you get involved and continue with us. So I'm going to ask all of our speakers who have their cameras on to give a big smile. Viva Fidel!
Thank you, everybody.
Viva Cuba! Viva la Revolución!
Thank you for the organization.
Thank you all.
Wonderful program.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Viva Fidel.
Viva Fidel.
Thank you, everyone. Viva
Viva.
Fidel. Viva la revolución.
Viva la revolución.
Viva.
Viva, gracias.
Viva el pueblo cubano.